Hello and welcome to In Conversation,
a series presented by Arts from Home featuring discussions with local Toronto creators. I'm Alyssa.
I'm Jaya.
And I'm Savannah, and these are the personal stories behind professional and community success.
5 years ago, Leah joined the family business, Solis Animation, founded by her brothers, Les and Lou Solis in 2010, specializing in 2D tradigital animation. The Toronto-based studio is independently owned and produces high-quality, critically acclaimed design and animation for film, television, SVOD, advertising, and digital media. Leah has managed the studio's more recent notable productions, including The Secret Path, CBC, Gary and His Demons, VRV, Season 2 of Champions, Bleacher Report, as well as music videos for artists such as Jessie, Reyez, and Rare Americans. Leah continues to help build the studio's brand, boost its own IP development, and solidify Solis's place in the industry.
Thank you so much, Leah. We are going to start at the very beginning, if that is okay with you.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So if you could tell us a little bit about your experience growing up, what your relationship was with art. It sounds like it was something that was in the family. So as a kid and then through high school and then again as you pursued a post-secondary path. And while you're speaking about that, if you could speak to any challenges that you may have had being a person of color who is pursuing the arts.
Yeah, for sure. So I don't know, I guess it starts back in the 70s. My parents immigrated from the Philippines and moved to Toronto. My brothers were really small at that time. And then in the mid 80s, I was born in Scarborough. And I pretty much grew up there, still sort of live there. I grew up in North Scarborough, went to school here, and I feel like really is that balance between, having that Filipino heritage and really growing up Canadian, and, art was always such a big part of my life because a lot of family were artists. An uncle of mine, he ended up going into graphic architecture design, but, I always knew him for designing and illustrating these beautiful portraits that I feel like everyone in our family sort of had a piece of his somewhere. And so that's something, I remember seeing as a young kid. And growing up, we had a cousin who lived with us during his university years, and he was a wonderful artist. And we would have, a whole bunch of his oil paintings, they were a lot darker, weird messages that I probably didn't understand at the time. But I always thought they looked super cool. It's a lot of mixed media art around the house. And it was just, a really great setting to have. And then, my two older brothers who are 9 and 11 years older than me, to have to, get to see them on stuff that they were working and, they were always drawing all the time. It was just a really cool environment to be in. I feel like growing up, I was more sort of musically inclined as opposed to visual fine arts. So, I took piano lessons and all throughout elementary and high school, I was in concert and stage bands, that was the stuff that I enjoyed. We always had music in the house. My dad would always be playing the Beatles. My mom would be playing more crooners like Frank Sinatra and Nat King Cole. And so I feel like that really fed into sort of the eclectic tastes in music and just kind of goes hand in hand with, visual arts and things like that. So, in high school, I feel like going into post-secondary, you're sort of at that stage where it's okay, seriously, what do I want to pursue and what should I be doing? And at that time, music was, a possibility, but, I was really coming from parents who are Filipinos and, who have moved here to, give you better opportunities and things like that. So, trying to also think of feasible employment was such a, important thing to think about as well. And I know I was struggling and challenging, found it challenging at that time to really figure out, is music sort of something that I, would be, I didn't know if I was a musical savant or anything like that. So I was just I don't know, and I remember, having to talk to, school counselors and things like that to just get some sort of advice in terms of what to move forward with. And I remember one of the counselors saying maybe going into business is sort of like a good foundational, and it's something that you hear all the time. And it's sort of like, a good, you sold it to me as like, hey, maybe this would be like a good foundation for you, regardless of what you decide to pursue later. And, I did end up taking that advice, and I did take like the more practical approach to my post-secondary education. And I ended up, getting a business degree at Reyez University. And I feel like the things I did learn there, the experiences I had there definitely did, help give me some, practical skills that are transferable regardless of what you get into. So, that was definitely good. And so, I feel like that helped, now when I joined my brothers, with the animation studio, that it helps me sort of bring that more business side and business acumen to this creative environment, which I think naturally is something that I am drawn to. So it's kind of like I was able to strike this really nice balance, I think, right now. But, at the time and like all the years going through, you're always, I'm still sort of like that, you're always thinking, well, what's a good route? Like what, what will bring success, or, what is it that you want to do with life in general? But where I've found myself has been, is really nice, and it's fulfilling and rewarding. And I feel like there is that balance that I get to strike between both those worlds.
Amazing. Yeah. I also have an older brother, so I relate to seeing the older brother character and kind of emulating what he is doing, and music as well. For me, I'm a musician. So that's, that all sounds very familiar. And I mean, if the questioning ever stops, I'd be concerned. I think it's a constant,
absolutely,
a constant journey.
Yeah. I think it's important to grow, and develop, but it's always so important to do what you love. And, not to say that with every job you have to, be fully passionate about, but I mean, it is important to have some sort of element of something that you enjoy, just to make it all worth it,
Yeah, absolutely. Lissa.
Yeah. So I'm very curious about what it's like working with your family and, managing your like brother's work and like joining the Solis team. Like, what's it like to kind of balance like the family aspect, and then how that has that like turned like professional? Like, what's that like space like for you guys? I know this is not a question.
No,
I
that's okay.
For you,
that's
but
okay.
Yeah, I'm so curious.
I always joke that like it must be fine. We haven't killed each other yet.
Right.
So
that's the line. That's the line.
Yeah, exactly. And it is a fun dynamic because they're so much older than me. Like I feel growing up even. Right. Yeah, and I feel like growing up too. Like there was very little, conflict really. I was always the little sister. I was the spoiled one. And so it was, it's really nice to have these, older brothers to look up to, and they're so talented in their own right. And so it's really nice to have been able to join them in this journey, with them, where as before, I was kind of watching them from afar. I'd help out every now and then, but to really be in it has been really nice. It went from, hardly seeing them to seeing them every day. Right. And, but it is, there is that balancing act that you have to play, because there are schedules and there are budgets you have to work with, and you are dealing with creative types, and so it does really you are constantly trying to feed everybody's strengths to make sure that everybody comes together as a team and produce something really great. And I feel like working with my brother, they're two of the coolest guys, and they're just so good. They're good people. so it's rare. We always get into our own arguments and things like that, but hey, we can always just tell mom about it later.
The great mediator.
Yeah, exactly. It is always work. Even though maybe we struggle sometimes, but we'll always find some sort of common ground and move past it, and we all know what we want to move towards. So that's always, it's nice. It's working through that together. So it's good.
That's so lovely to hear.
It's working for now.
For now. And so, I mean, I know you're, you are on like the business side of, this creative team. What is it like balancing like this creative energy inside and world and the business aspect of it? Like, how do you merge the two? Like, that's the age-old question for individual independent artists like me and Savannah. Like, how do you balance your art and work and merge them into this beautiful baby that is a successful business?
I definitely have the pleasure of dealing with that all the time. And, it is really hard to, sometimes for creative artists to really find the motivation that you need to, meet certain deadlines or, really get work done, whether or not it's for a client or for yourself. So, really where I come in is just it's really more of offering support for the artists to help them manage their time and be really communicative with, meeting certain quotas. It's like, as long as they know what they have to do, sort of like either on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, that's important for someone even just to know, because then it's like, okay, I know what my task is today. I'm going to try and meet that. And then that's, you end up getting there as a team. And I feel like that's sort of the most important, like being super organized and being able to communicate really well are sort of like the two big things that you have to make sure happen in a team environment like that.
I wanted to segue off of what you were talking about in terms of like working with your family and your brothers and everything with that. And I was just curious to know, like, so the team at Solis Animation, you guys recently worked on the Jessie Reyez new music video for the song Intruders, and Lizzo also just released an animated music video for her song Soulmate. So how do you see the cultural relationship with animation changing in a socially distanced world, and also how has COVID affected your team at Solis, seeing as though we have been digital for quite some time now?
Yeah, I mean, like I always say we're sort of lucky in the animation world because I feel like artists are working from home a lot of the time anyways. I mean, like, it's definitely been an adjustment. Like I feel for anyone who has young kids at home and still have to, it's almost like you're still maintaining that work schedule because, those schedules and deadlines haven't changed, but on top of that you're like full-time teaching and cooking for your family, and so it's a lot. And I think but I think everybody's sort of over this almost 4 months have sort of made the adjustment and figured out like what works for them. Again, what's nice to work with artists, you sort of leave them to do whatever they need to do, and sort of fit what they need to in their own schedules and sort of work at their own pace. You're just sort of gently nudging. It was really great to work on the Jessie Reyez video like that. It's been around for about a year. So we had started working on it about a year ago, maybe less than a year ago. And we've worked with that production company, Mad Rock Entertainment. They do a lot of music video production, and we love them over there. And it's been a real treat and like honor to work on Jessie's stuff. And that song in particular, just the route that they wanted to take with that video was a strong and powerful one, especially now. And so it was just really lucky to have been able to be a part of that for sure, and help with that message. In terms of seeing diversity in animation, like, it's been nice, I would say, in the last few years. I feel like there has been this want and need to see more diversity in characters and things like that, which is great, because I do believe like representation is so important. In terms of voice acting as well has been good to see that they really want to broaden that net for voice acting, and so that's nice to see as well. But it is still such a tricky space to be in, with voice acting in general. I feel like in Toronto anyways, it's like there's such a small, sort of like small intimate community already that sort of takes a lot of, or like has a lot of the roles anyway in voice acting. And so I don't know, how much that will change. I'm hoping it will, just to sort of give, sort of widen, I guess, your reach in terms of making opportunities available for more people. Like it's so tricky, because I think this happens in casting for live action as well. There's such a pressure to get sort of big names already attached to your project to even get it made. And so, until there's a wider acceptance of, like, truly wider acceptance of new voices, like, I don't know how much that will change. And you really are hoping that it will.
Yeah. I definitely, everything you're saying, for me personally, like I feel like I'm connected to the Toronto music or art scene, but then I realize that it's actually just music. And like you, to me, are such a interesting window into a world that I know nothing about in terms of Toronto arts, like the animation community, and even talking about casting. And yeah, I feel like a little bit of a curious, like,
no, yeah,
looking in from the outside. Yeah, I just don't, there's so much I don't know about that world, and it sounds very interesting. But yeah, you definitely answered the question I was going to ask, just based off of the sort of the larger conversation around animation that's happening, with Mike Henry saying he won't play Cleveland Brown anymore, and The Simpsons saying that they won't use non-white actors to play non-white characters. So yeah, thank you for speaking to that. And yeah, maybe I'll pass it off to Alyssa. I don't know, any other follow-ups from you guys, Alyssa or Jaya?
I think you hit a few questions off our list.
Sorry.
No, it's amazing.
No, it's great. That was amazing. So in terms of, being in the art scene in Toronto, in the animation world, what do you think of, like, the community, and is there ways in which, I mean, you spoke on this before about, giving more opportunity to different new voices, but are there ways in which you feel things can be improved, and are there things that you are genuinely really, like, impressed and proud of about the Toronto arts community, especially around animation?
Yeah, I like being in Toronto in the sense that there is so much talent here, and unlike a lot of regions, like, there is a lot of support that is available for all these little communities. Like Savannah, you mentioned that you're part of music, the music community, but there's so many different sections of art. You have theater, and you have animation, and you have the comic book industry, and like everybody's got like these small they're big but like in relation, there's small, a whole bunch of these small groups that sort of have their own interests and their passions and things like that. And I think in Toronto, it's just, I feel like if you search for it, there is going to be some sort of like public group that is supportive of that community. I mean, I still find it a bit tough, if you're new and a little bit shy. Like I can totally relate to that, being a shy person, to feel comfortable enough to actually, check these groups out, because a lot of the time when you go, it seems very, cliquey, or, people it's really just a meet and greet to, of people who've been getting together for years already. So it's it feels a little intimidating to go in there and sort of, create these relationships, you have these relationships with people. So, it's nice to see when groups have, specifically sort of like welcome new members, like, sessions for people. That's always like really nice. I know WIFT, which is like the Women in Film and Television group here in Toronto, do that like quite often. But I mean, mind you, even the accessibility to that group, it's like you have to pay for a membership, so it's not always available to everybody. But what's nice in Toronto that there are a lot of public groups that are available, like Women Drum Together is like another one in the animation production space that is free to join, and it's nice to see that there are groups that are there meant to support other people in that group. And it's, even though naturally there is like this competition between people to get jobs and things like that, it's still, I'm hoping to see I'm hoping that it is more about helping support these people and give the resources to everybody so that it sort of elevates everyone to sort of that same level. And you're able to contribute. I think everybody, there's just like such an abundance of talent in the city and in regions all over Canada. And you just wish that everyone is able to have that opportunity to sort of showcase that. And so hopefully opportunities are made more available for everybody. It's pretty tricky. You still see that even in terms of like funding programs and things like that. It is still, I think there's a lot of room to grow and to improve in terms of getting some money to artists and things like that in order to make their content. It's so tough because there's just so much of it available, and you sometimes see that it tends to go to the same hands all the time. And so you just hope that it just continues to grow and spread.
Amazing. Yeah, something Alyssa and I were talking, I'm just going to jump in quick if that's okay. Something Alyssa and I were talking about even before you got on, we were just thinking about the ways in which content is made and sort of the breadth of maybe the spectrum being from like lower budget indie kind of stuff, and I'm thinking of live action more, or like lower budget indie movies with just a couple people, whatever, simple set, all the way to like Superman, whatever.
Yeah,
these big Marvel movies. I don't know, I said Superman, I clearly don't know about what Marvel's doing. But I was wondering about the opportunity for animation to venture more into the fantastical worlds that have previously required lots of people and big, I'm asking from a total place of ignorance, so maybe that's not the case, but in terms of the process of returning to creating content that requires groups of people, do you think does animation have a little bit of a leg up in that sense, or is that
especially now when you've seen sort of live productions completely go on pause and still have that uncertainty of how they're transitioning back to like continuing that, like I've definitely seen sort of a increase in interest in animated content, and sort of you get all these live production houses who are now interested in, okay, well maybe we'll dabble into animation because it's more feasible these days, especially like the only thing that would be challenging right now, which I think people are adjusting to, is again voice records, getting people in to record voices, but people have been doing that from home, and they're figuring it out. I'm sure there will be easier ways of doing that, but yeah, definitely in terms of like versus live action, where you do need like really big teams of people like working closely together and like in the same space, that is a little bit tough right now. So we are seeing I feel for the most part a lot of animation productions have been able to roll in pretty well.
It makes me
continue,
it makes you think of musicians, like the accessibility of someone wanting to be a musician has really opened up since the invention of the MacBook and having a whatever, like it's just become way more accessible, even though like there's a little bit of a price accessibility issue, but it's much lower than it's ever been. So maybe in terms of creating media content, I don't know, it sounds like a sort of an analogy for a similar situation in music, which is interesting.
I think like with the internet, having access to internet and more affordable ways to like capture things, like people are like making movies on their iPhones, the ability to create content is so is much easier. Easier now. There is definitely still we kind of take access to internet for granted sometimes. Like I feel like that nowadays, like that really is a basic necessity, but you still think there are so many people who don't have that yet. And so there is still, you know, those technological gaps, but yeah, it is nice to see that, you know, a lot of people are now able to make their own content, get it out there. I think the challenging thing still is exposure, you know, with everybody being able to create content. Now you just have that much more stuff available to consume, and, you know, you can only consume so much in a day. And so it becomes, okay, well, how do we get that audience now to pay attention to the stuff that you're putting out? Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Back to the regular scheduled programming. I sort of derailed us there a little bit.
That's okay.
I don't know how you guys are feeling, Alyssa and Jay, but I would love to wrap up just with a couple like questions about a little bit more like nerdy, I don't know, our I don't know, podcast question. Like, so you're someone who does podcasting. And just in the brief, I'm correct about that, right? You have
sort of. I mean, like this goes back to like the ease of creating your own content, and it was one of those things where, you know, you get into the studio with your team, and, you know, you're working on a specific production, but like in between, like you're having these side conversations about stuff that you like and movies that you hate, and like how to fix something that, you know, how to fix the ending of Batman versus Superman or something.
Right. Oh, the worst movie I've ever seen.
And so you end up having these side conversations, and then it was just, you know, something fun that we thought, okay, well, let's start recording, because you know, it kind of helps also with your storytelling skills, and it's you know, it's just something more fun to spend a little bit of time doing. So that's what ended up happening. Yeah.
And can you direct people to where they would find this if they're interested in listening?
If they want to, it's like an app, but it's on Spotify. It's called We Can Fix It. It's a podcast. It's like on Apple, I think, too, and Spotify.
Awesome.
But yeah, it's just like we take movies that we should have liked, like in theory, it's like, oh, we should have liked that Indiana Jones movie, and then you watch it and it's absolutely terrible, and then you sort of play around with it and see, well, what could have been done to make it better. So I don't know. I don't know if there's anyone who wants to listen to that.
No, I mean, all I want to say is like, I don't want to be like weird, but I definitely like checked out your Instagram prior to this conversation, and all it makes me think of is how much I mean, I'm a big into podcasts, and all it makes me think of is how much I love the vibe that comes from a group of people that are creating content like that. And so when I mean, I don't know, I'm sure you've listened to like, how did this get made? That kind of thing. So I love that pod. Love the podcast. For people who don't know, it's about, they review bad movies basically. And the energy that is between the co-hosts on that show is like similar. When I checked out your Instagram, I was like, oh yes, like she got like, she's got this cool vibe going. And I think when there is so much content and there's so much saturation of the market, like it's that energy and that sort of, I don't know, it's almost like a weirdness that is so attractive to someone like me who just wants to know more about a world that I don't know anything about. So anyway, I just wanted to gush a little bit.
No,
I think you're doing very cool things.
No, totally. And I mean, like, I think, and that's what's great about, again, the internet in general, because it's like, you know, you have everybody whose interests can be so niche or you know, very particular. And so when you're able to find, you know, that group of people who's talking about the things that you know, maybe can't talk to your other friends about or have anybody to talk about that stuff, it's nice to be able to find those types of things that you can sort of geek out about.
And then my only other question is, have you watched Midnight Gospel?
I have not yet. Not much. I have wanted to, because you know, it's the animation studio Titmouse worked on that, and they're like, you know, a studio that we've worked on a lot of stuff with throughout the years.
Oh, amazing.
And I've been meaning to check it out, and you know, I've heard such good things. I did watch the pilot.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
And it's a lot of fun, because it is you know, you're taking, I think that's why we had a lot of fun working on that show, Gary and His Demons, is because you get this natural, the natural, more conversational vibe of something, and then being able to animate that and sort of slip in these visual like gags that like have nothing to do with the philosophical question that is, you know, that is happening in something like Midnight Gospel. It's just, it's almost like it's hitting so many different things. It's like you can sit and like listen to the philosophical conversation that's happening, but meanwhile, if you're watching it, like there are these side subtle animated jokes that are happening that really is what I was kind of resonating with, and that's what was what I found funny. And so it's great it's being able to animate podcasts and conversations like that definitely is something that like our team like is very interested in and like to do. It's more fun.
Yeah. Okay, guys, I'm done my little nerding out moment. Anyone else want to go?
Yeah, if I can jump in for a quick bit, I know we only have a little bit, but as Savannah has mentioned, I'm more on the sporty side. I'm learning arts through all of this. So when I saw that you were a part of the champions for Bleacher Report, I was like, hello, let's go. I have so many things because
my God.
Like I watch all of those videos. I love
That's
them.
so
I'm a
great.
huge Bleacher Report football with soccer for us Western commoners, as we know. I loved, like, I found it hilarious because if you watch like the games and you watch these players, like, of course it's a spoof and it's a parody, but there's some like exaggerated truth to all that. So how did that come to be? Like what happened with that? That was amazing. Like how did you get involved?
We worked on season 2, so there had already been a full first season of the series, and it's just this short web series that follows the Champions League. And like it was through a guy, Chris Wallinger, who works for Bleacher Report, and my brother Lou had worked with him back when he used to work in Brooklyn for Augenblick Studios. And so he had reached out to us because I think their team was just so busy working on another production. So he was like, hey, if you can help us out with this, that would be great. And so we were able to work on season 2. I think we learned like the most about European football. Like I think we learned so much about that because it is full of Easter eggs, and we found ourselves always like going back to them like, what does this mean? Like, what does this joke mean? Can you explain to, like, how is this guy supposed to be dancing? Like, I don't understand. And because so much of it was based on these current gifs of players, and so it was a lot of fun to really be exposed to that world. And then I feel like after working on season 2, it's like you start noticing the news and you're like, oh, I kind of understand what that means. Like, I understand what that game means now, or like who that player is. I get it. So I joke that is like the thing that we worked on that the most people have watched. Because there are like millions of views on that thing. We're just like, I don't know. It was fun. Fun to do. Production-wise, it was a little bit of a nightmare because it was like very, very truncated time because it had to be so current. So it was, like it all depended on like what team was going to win that week. We had to like change jerseys and change players and all that type of stuff. Or like if I feel like Antoine Griezmann had like cut his hair, and so like, we had to change that. Exactly. So it was a lot of fun, but a lot of work. But definitely like rewarding now that that it's out there. A lot of people who really enjoyed that series. So.
Yeah, so I am definitely one of those people. So thank you so much for providing that entertainment, because it was very relevant. And like I said, I watched the Premier League too, so I was like, oh, this is hilarious. Amazing. It's so spot on. I love it. So thank you. That's my nerd geek out question.
I'm so happy to hear that.
Alyssa, do you have a
my nerding out is just watching you guys talk all together and enjoying each other's company.
That's sweet.
Well, just to wrap things up here, is there anything that you like, any advice you'd have for any emerging artists that especially that are managing themselves? You went through being organized and things like that, but like also on the I guess like emotional and keeping like the emotional and physical self balanced while having to do that. Any last words?
Yes. Any last words? Advice for like any artist, I feel or in the animation industry anyways, I feel like the one rule is just like, hey, your ability to adapt is so important. So because you're not always going to necessarily be able to work on your own stuff, you know, like if you're working for a studio, it's like, you know, they're going to want this to look a certain way. And so your ability to do that is invaluable. And it's so, you know, your ability to adapt to what is being asked of you is so, you know, being able to do that is just so helpful and so great. But at the same time, it's like, for your own sanity and creativity, to be able to carve out time for yourself and for your own art and for your own vision is so important. to just make sure that you still love what you do. And so like I said, like when now that it's so easy, well, not so easy, but easier to create your own content, like being able to do that and taking time to do that for yourself is just so rewarding and cathartic and freeing. And especially now when everyone's cooped up at home, you know, the ability to do that and just make a point of taking some time to do that for yourself is a good thing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Wow,
Is there
that's
any other things you want to plug or direct us to in terms of Solis, or if not, that's fine, but if there is?
I mean, like we work on a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
We got a lot of
website.
stuff.
Check out the website.
Solisanimation.com. Yeah, we've been doing these music videos for this band called Rare Americans, who are from BC, and they've been, you know, for a little bit of time there, they were releasing something like every 3 weeks, and so, you know, they've been really pumping out some content, and so it's been nice to help them with their video. The Jessie Reyez video, Intruders, is a great one. And there's a I don't know if you have any wrestling fans. Wrestling fans out there. But we've been, you know, working with, there's a Toronto independent wrestler named RJ City, and we just actually released like a little cartoon clip today, working with him on stuff. So
cool.
Check him out. He's at RJ City 1 on Twitter. So it's a lot of good content there to keep you entertained during this time.
Love the diversity. Man, you got your foot in everywhere.
We don't discriminate. It's like there's so much talent, you know.
And you're flexible, you're versatile. What was the word you used?
Adaptable.
There you go.
All
That's
together
right.
now.
Adaptable. I think there's a lag. Anyway.
I think a little.
All right. It's great what you guys are doing. You know, it's really nice to be supporting, you know, the arts community, especially during this time. It must be really tough and very difficult, but being able to still create is great.
Yes.
Good on you. Good on you.
Well, thank you so much. Well, this really wouldn't be possible without people like you, and we've just learned so much about your world and what you do, and it's just been it's been so fun just to even finding people for our show, because you know, I just found you on the internet.
Yeah.
See? The internet provides.
Just take the resources are there.
There's a good and bad, but it's definitely a good space to find new things for sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for reaching out. It was nice.
So nice to meet you. Thank you.
It's nice to meet you.
Hopefully our paths will cross again.
Yes. Absolutely.
Right.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Nice
and
to
thank you
meet
for
you
letting
all.
me geek out.
Yeah.
Anytime.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.